Welcome to Solve, the political discussion show for people with attention spans and those looking to develop one. My name is Jay, and our other resident solvers are Amanda, Deon, and Erin, who will offer a greeting now.
Hey there.
Hello.
How's it going?
Collectively, we produce the venerable, indispensable, not to mention award-winning podcast, Best of the Left, where humans, that's us, curate progressive media on a chosen topic, creating episodes that are greater than the sum of their parts. On this show, we use those same curation skills to pull together stories and ideas to help us solve some of society's biggest problems. Because if we don't tell you how to think, someone dumber on the internet will. Today, people's brains are broken, and they're taking us all down with them. Is your brain broken? Probably, a little bit. Let's find out. Today, we're starting with this from the New Republic. The 1%'s fear of death is wreaking havoc on the world. And so, first describes Silicon Valley obsessives who think that they can invent their way toward cheating death. This isn't in the article, but I would add that Putin and Xi were just caught on a hot mic at a summit discussing the possibility of living forever. And then back to the article, it also points to the gerontocracy of politicians who simply refuse to let go of power, no matter how old they get. And it says, quote, "At some point, one starts to recognize that so much of today's political and cultural environment is ruled by those who are visibly, pathologically afraid of death. And many of these people, rather than face up to this fear and deal with it, are instead wreaking untold havoc on the world around us," end quote. And it then goes on to describe a book published over 50 years ago, The Denial of Death, that has some interesting things to say about that, which we will get into. But how does everyone feel about people's fear of death?
I love that it made its way into our discussion just because this is something that I've been ruminating on. I've known it for years, had the thoughts, but I feel like more and more as we see AI and certain Silicon Valley moguls make their way into more mainstream, giving their philosophies, their background, I think this is so prevalent in how they're thinking of avoiding the inevitability that is death. Because you can prolong life. It does not mean at the end of it, you're still not faced with that inevitability.
Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about for a long time too. Just culturally, I think America specifically doesn't reckon with death the way that other cultures do. Christianity itself is a religion of you will last forever. You will be fine. You say you like this guy, you get to live forever. And
death is not the end.
It's no. And that has pervaded everything. And of course, the richest among us want to die the least, but also probably don't actually believe in the religion. So they're literally trying to do it, not metaphorically.
Yeah, with the exception of Peter Thiel, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, they thought that money was what would give them immortality. And of course, now they're trying to apply that money to make it possible for them to live forever. But it's the inevitability of wealth. It's that you can accumulate all the money you want, but it doesn't change the final outcome. That's just the truth. And so they're like, well, God damn it, I got to change the final outcome. And now I have so much money that maybe it's possible.
And to both of your points, I'm thinking about the recent Donald Trump clip that is pervading the social media sphere of him saying he doesn't think he'll get into heaven. And I was like, oh, that adds a really good layer, because I thought they were so entrenched in their own belief systems that they thought they were of God. But here we are, maybe they're trying to get everlasting life because they know the Christian version of that is not available to them.
Yeah, particularly Donald Trump. He's not Christian. He's not religious at all. He doesn't believe in any of that and never has. So he phrases it now. I don't think I'm going to get into heaven. And maybe he's in the bargaining phase or whatever. And he's like, maybe it's real. But he's never thought it was real. And he is reckoning with the fact that he's a bad person. And the Silicon Valley people, same. It's been quite a while, but we did a long time ago have a conversation about how a lot of what Silicon Valley is producing is a new religion because they're
Yeah.
not religious. Those tech dudes are not Christians by and large, but they have the same like human fallibility and fear of death and all of the rest that everyone throughout all of time has had. And usually people deal with that by becoming religious, but the Silicon Valley people are dealing with it in their own way. And they're accidentally building their own techno religion, trying to accomplish the same goals. We're going to live forever, either physically, or we're going to be able to upload our brains to the cloud. And so that'll be basically the same thing. Like, what does that sound like? So the parallels with a desire for there to be a heaven are not subtle, even like it's blaringly obvious. We're just going through a new phase of people dealing with very old questions, which is why this book, The Denial of Death, written over 50 years ago, is still so relevant to today. And obviously, 50 years ago, no one was thinking, like, I'll upload my consciousness to the cloud, but they all had the same fear of death and dealt with it in their own way. So the book says, quote, unable to conquer death itself, we look for proxies, ways we can assert power over that which inspires fear. For Becker, that's the author of the book, this has a range of knock-on effects, from the affirmative desire for love and children to carry on our lineage past our own death, to more active hostility toward others like us, hatred, intolerance, political repression. What are these but attempts to control that which we fear? And what more do we fear than our own death? End quote.
I wanted to mention, speaking about Donald Trump evaluating his chances of getting into heaven, he's a 79-year-old man. It is not unusual for a 79-year-old man to start questioning what's next or did I live a good life? But I just didn't think Donald Trump would do it. So it's been kind of interesting because this isn't just the first time. He's actually talked about this a fair amount. He's also talked about where his parents are and has made allusions to the fact that his father might be in hell and looking up at him, as he said. And I can't confirm this, but I don't remember other presidents being asked about this stuff or be even mentioning this stuff. And I mean, part of it is his age, obviously, but has no filter. So of course he's talking about this more and more because he is thinking about it to some degree, which is interesting. I find it interesting. But it's also the reason that everyone around him has to keep telling him that everything he's doing will be like he will be immortal. And so, for instance, after this quote unquote peace deal in Israel, all of those politicians kept saying his name will be immortal, like he will live on forever. That is like the prime message of all of those politicians when he went over there, when he went to Israel, is trying to tell him you have done something that will make you a legacy. This will be your legacy for ever and ever and ever. And they're doing that because it's not like they care exactly about his ego, but they're doing it because they know that his fear of death and his mentioning it all the time is about his frightened ego. And so to appeal to the ego in this case, they are saying you will live forever because of what you've done here. And that's not a great way to do international relations or politics. It's not really the best tactic to just appease someone's fear of death or fear of being forgotten. But Trump is no different than the tech moguls who are much younger than him, but are realizing sooner, well, gee, I got to get a jump on this because I can't just be a blip. I can't just be what millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people before me have been, a blip on this planet. And it's sad because all of it is based in ego, all of it.
This right here is exactly why the robber barons were objectively better than our current moguls, is because they're not different people. Like J.D. Rockefeller and Peter Thiel psychologically were probably very similar people, but Rockefeller knew that he was going to die. So he wanted to have a legacy. Yeah. So he did do all these public works and have his name everywhere, out of ego, which did benefit people, but it was just out of ego and not wanting to leave. Whereas this group of people have the same ego, but it's even more America coded and individualized. So they think they can break beyond this little prison of the human body and live forever. So why would I spend any of my money on public works? Why would I want my name to be out there? Because I'm going to be here still. It's the same type of person, just push down this America individualism pipeline even further. And now they're even more rich and even more selfish and care less about people because their legacy will just be, well, I'll be here forever ruling all of you.
I can't remember what the context was, but just last week, I think, Erin, you were the one who pointed out that Trump will sometimes do things that are good for people, but that's always incidental. Like it's always about his own ego, and he's trying to make himself look big and impressive or be immortal or whatever. And sometimes that helps people, sometimes not. But it's almost like the best the rest of us can hope for is that these maniacs' egos can be pointed in positive directions rather than negative directions. And that's sort of the dichotomy Deon is pointing out with the various moguls from different decades.
Well, and to speak on the quote from the article, Jay, that you read out, specifically the part about them having children to sustain their legacy, what I find very interesting, just like on the psychological level, and like I think this is a testament to how mentally warped their perspective is, that their answer is to create as many children as possible instead of having a few children that you heavily invest in order to guarantee their success in life. That would actually mean spending time with your children,
Right.
investing them on an emotional level, which, let's be honest, they are not capable of. I think the best case for why they shouldn't have children is because your vision of fatherhood is throwing money at something, specifically someone, and having them take care of your children and hoping that in them having your last name, your legacy, like that's not a testament to you
No,
and what
just your
you've offered.
DNA means nothing.
Yeah. And all of the like cultural, social work has been done by other people to create this being, whether they're great or not. I mean, all life has inherent value, so I don't think that matters. But yeah, your vision of legacy is throwing money, whether that's at humans or projects or companies or whatever, and you're disconnected. That's not actually investing in relationships. Maybe they need to watch like Coco, right? Where you learn that like you live on through the memories of your loved ones. And if their memory is you throwing money at them, but not actually spending time with them or investing them or caring about any of their interests, yeah, probably you're not going to live on.
Yeah, they're not going to make any effort to make sure that everyone knew their father's name if their father means quite literally nothing to them, right?
Yeah, their grandchildren will not know Papa as like this great man who really cared about all of us and loved and supported it. Like, no.
This article started with a little story about a very rich person who is taking the plasma from their son's blood to inject into themselves in order to try to be more youthful and live longer.
A vampire.
And yeah, and I've heard about this. I know this is a thing that happens. I'm pretty sure Peter Thiel does this as well, and all of these other guys. Like, that is a level of, yeah, I mean, vampire is the closest word we have, but like to use your offspring as a resource and not see them as fully human, because you wouldn't do that if you saw them as fully human,
Yeah.
is a level of human devolution that is terrifying to me. And the idea that that's spreading and that people aren't completely horrified at a larger scale. I mean, mostly I think people don't know, but that should be morally repugnant and universally condemned.
That person is named Brian Johnson, who I have heard of, but not dived too deep into. But I know him from reputation, that he's the guy who does all that weird stuff to try to live forever. And the article points out that Katie Drummond interviewed Johnson for Wired and asked him flat out, true or false, you, Brian Johnson, the man sitting across from me, one day at some point in the future will die, to which he replied, false. So, yeah, those are Those are the people we're talking about.
I would like to take a moment to offer empathy to these individuals' offspring, because what agency do you get as a child of one of these people who have this belief system when you're an extension of them and not your own person? So, like when Amanda's talking about devaluing their life, absolutely, because you're not meeting your own expectations in the world. Like you're absolutely meeting daddy's expectations. And most likely you're not meeting, because you're not going to be an exact replica, which to me, I think they'd rather have clones that they raise than actual children who are their own people.
Yeah, good point. That's the premise of the Isaac Asimov book Foundation, is that there are characters who are so afraid of dying that they do clone themselves and have their empire be perpetually ruled not by their descendants, but by the closest approximation to literally themselves forever. Yep, it's gross and weird. So just another couple of quotes from this book. So fear is at the heart of it, and this is how it connects to Trump and his followers. It says, quote, this is pulling from the book itself, The Denial of Death. Man is a trembling animal who pulls the world down around his shoulders as he clutches for protection and support and tries to affirm in a cowardly way his feeble powers, end quote. But the article continues, it's hard to find a more fitting and succinct description of Trump and his rabid followers, or those savaging the environment with energy-sucking data centers to run half-assed AI in the belief that doing so will grant them immortality, end quote. This article goes into so much more detail than we have time for. They get into, so like I said, the book is more than 50 years old. Plenty of research has been done in the meantime. There's been a theory developed, terror management theory, that sort of gets at this question of how much does fear of death drive people's actions and decisions throughout their lives and when they interact with the world. So there is research to dive into, and we definitely recommend checking out the rest of the article. But the conclusion for our conversation ends with this quote: terror management theory also has found repeated evidence to suggest that one of the many factors driving the rightward slide of culture over the past few years may be found in a widespread terror of mortality, which is pushing people to embrace authoritarians and xenophobia. Which is to say, the insights that Becker hit upon more than 50 years ago could never be more relevant. And at least part of the work of pushing against the terrifying tide of fascist encroachment must start with laying bare that fear of death and what that fear drives us individually and collectively to do, end quote. To which I say, well, that's just fucking great. To avoid fascism, all we have to do is get people to stop fearing death. Of all things, no problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we're laughing, but in this country, I really do think that might be one of the biggest hurdles we could possibly face because of the superstructure of Christianity. It is based on you're never going to die. And I do think, joked about that guy being a vampire, but there is something about vampire stories that kind of wanes and waxes over time, where the vampire is evil and the villain, and then there's sometimes where the vampire is cool and kind of like something like you would want to be. And I think we're in that,
and also hot,
that moment. Yeah, also hot
and
because
sparkly.
You're hot forever. and that I think is that moment we're in where the vampire is cool and hot because we're taking the wrong lessons from the story and we're saying like, we'll just live forever and that would be great and it would be amazing, as opposed to what the vampire story actually is this wretched, soulless character who watches everyone that's ever loved die. There is nothing that it cares about, loves, needs, wants anymore. It only thinks about feeding and living forever. That's the only goal. And if that's the only goal, your life is meaningless. It has lost all meaning because there is no beginning, middle, and end, because that's the key. There has to be an end to the story for it to have meaning. And if your only meaning is living forever, then you don't have meaning. And that's what people miss from that and are pursuing in a more, I don't know if realistic way is the right way to say it, but like this idea that you're going to transfer your consciousness over into the cloud, into AI, you would not be you anymore. You're missing the whole point. You will not exist. There is no escaping it. And
Right.
getting people to believe that, especially in this time of AI and Christian white supremacy, man, that is a big ask.
Yeah. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that the rise of the wellness industry has coincided with all of this, exaggerated obsession with living forever. The wellness people are trying to sell you stuff that does not work and will not help you, but they say just buy this and do these things and then you can live longer and better. And they're praying, of course, like the root of it is the false idea that you have any control over when death comes for you or age even. I mean, we're talking about death, but we could scale it back. Aging at all, looking like you are moving through time is seen as a negative and scary thing. And of course, women have been experiencing that kind of assault on our psyche forever because we've been told we are worthless if we are not young and somehow drinking from the fountain of youth. And it has deeply damaged our self-worth, happiness, and maybe the most infuriating part of it is that it's stolen our money, but also our time, our precious finite time on this planet, as women spend it researching the best elixirs and treatments and clothes to hold on to youth. The irony of that is so sad. And that is actually what these men are doing. They're spending their precious finite time searching for the fountain of youth. The irony, the irony. Look, chances are they're not going to get there in their lifetime. So they are wasting their time.
I'm having this thought that kind of goes back to quite a few episodes ago where we were talking about because of the immense wealth that's been accumulated, you don't have the capacity to have authentic relationships. Like the money gets in the way of that. So I'm thinking their greatest relationship in their life has been with themselves. Which then would make sense if that is the relationship that you covet, if that's the person that you hold the most value in. Of course, you create systems like AI where you think I'll just transfer myself over there and it'll be the same thing. Like how disconnected you are from society, from real everyday people, your average humans existing in the world, shows you not being able to distinguish the difference between your consciousness and AI replicating it.
The next group on the list of people with broken brains, this from Current Affairs, the right's latest culture war crusade is against empathy. And this has been bubbling for a while. I definitely came across this trend years ago. I can't remember how many, but it's bubbling up more and more to the mainstream. So the article says, quote, Elon Musk doesn't like empathy, which he calls the, quote, fundamental weakness of Western civilization, which people then exploit. The late Charlie Kirk did not like empathy either, commenting that, quote, I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that it does a lot of damage. The article then goes on to talk about 2 conservative Christians have published books arguing that empathy can be corrosive. Allie Beth Stuckey's Toxic Empathy and Joe Rigney's The Sin of Empathy. The one that I may have come across first is this one. Pastor Josh McPherson on his Stronger Man Nation podcast was emphatically anti-empathy, saying, quote, empathy almost needs to be struck from the Christian vocabulary. Empathy is dangerous. Empathy is toxic. Empathy will align you with hell, end quote. Has anyone else been following this trend for a while?
We have. I was going to say years ago, before this show was on YouTube, like 2021, I think, we did a show all about the burgeoning topic of empathy in churches and how it was splitting churches apart. And it, may have been the Josh McPherson pastor who we read about initially all those years ago. And the premise then, of course, was, and I'm sure it is now, but at the time, it was much more about realizing that the teaching of Jesus is woke and therefore must be weak. And these followers Of course, now they can barely be called that, were basically saying to their pastors, like, we need to get rid of this garbage. This isn't helpful. This is all woke crap, and this isn't strong and fierce and mighty. If you think Jesus is weak, then you aren't really a Christian, are you? It's like, if Jesus is the Son of God and all powerful, then, and you think all this crap that he espoused is just weak sauce and not worth using in your life, then you're going to have to reevaluate your status as a Christian. And all of this seemed absurd back then because it was just, I mean, it was the stuff that, of course, the left has been saying how hypocritical Christians are for a long time. But it was like this moment where, oh, are some of them actually waking up to the fact that they are hypocrites in their faith? And now it's get a publishing deal book level of mainstream. And that is a problem. Of course, Kirk made it much more mainstream than it was. And he was a very religious person. And of course, he was going to follow the path where we suddenly decide that all of these values and virtues that Jesus said are not useful anymore, but still claim the title of Christian and ultra uber religious. And that's ridiculous.
Along those lines of them thinking that Jesus is woke now, there's this push in the administration to label Antifa a terrorist group, and they are redefining Antifa to be fascist. Antifa are the fascists, which is kind of along the lines of Peter Thiel giving a 4-part private speech on the Antichrist, because if any human being on planet Earth would be described as the Antichrist, it would be someone like Peter Thiel. And he's trying to redefine it to someone like, who I think, honestly, is one of the best humans among us, is Greta Thunberg. Mm-hmm. That is who they are saying. That type of person is the Antichrist, which
anti-AI, anti-progress.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she's the bad person, which will be interesting to see how long this version of Christianity continues to call itself Christianity, or remains where Christ is the lead word. They might have to switch that at some point. I think they're getting close because they don't like the words of Christ. They absolutely do not. This is a cult of individual. This is a cult of becoming your own God. And that's what they're pushing. And that is the opposite of what those words in the book that they claim to follow say you're supposed to do. You're supposed to help the other, the least among us, all that stuff. They don't like it because it takes away from self-aggrandizing, making yourself the most important thing, living forever. And that change, I don't know if it'll happen on our lifetime where they fully rebrand, but it's happening. I wish I could remember his name, but also I'm glad I don't remember his name. One of these super just racist white supremacist pastors who has this branding that behind him isn't a cross anymore. It's this kind of symbol that looks vaguely fascist. I don't know if it's a dog whistle or whatever, but that's what's behind him when he's on his podcast talking about how bad empathy is. And it's this new version. It's a subset of Christianity. I've been thinking this for a long time.
Co-opting,
these people,
really?
Yeah. They are using the name Christianity to launder just the most hateful version that they possibly could, all in the process of just making themselves the most important, the most special, the most unique little snowflakes that have ever existed. And they have to live forever because they are that great. And it's okay for others to not exist or be pushed out or hurt because they don't believe, they're not as special. And this is all just a justification for being a piece of shit. That's what they're bad people, that it would actually help them to maybe follow the guy that they say that they follow.
I feel like there are progressive theologians listening, yelling back at you, Deon. They're like, no, this isn't new. They're not going to rebrand. Christianity's gone through this over and over again for thousands of years. Like that's the whole thing. It's almost infinitely malleable. And that's how you end up with all these branching upon branching upon branching sects of people who all claim to be, no, but actually we're the only ones who have it right, even though we're 1% of the whole, and all the others who claim to be Christians, they're not really. It's the same shit, different day. And sometimes they branch off for good reasons and sometimes bad, sometimes medium, sometimes fascism. Like it's the whole spectrum. But in essence, what it comes down to is the mirror world. Again, it's always the mirror world in these discussions. So in this article, it says, throughout Stuckey's book, she opens chapters by showing what seem like situations in which we should empathize with people. A woman forced by law to give birth to a child who will inevitably die of a horrible genetic condition. A transgender person who receives affirming treatment. George Floyd. Before showing that if we take the side of this person, we are acting contrary to conservative principles and fundamentalist Christianity, end quote, to which I respond, right. Exactly. You've got it exactly. You have nailed the dynamic. You've described it. And now we all understand conservatism, fundamentalist Christianity principles are anti-people. Thank you for laying it out for us.
The whole time I'm reading her arguments, I mean, I'll be honest, I was vaguely curious how she outlined some of these examples and how she portrayed them. And the writer seems to say that she gives a very empathetic view. I want to hear how she switches it for each one of these examples. But they have a quote in here from her book that it just describes the end times future that they are hoping for, right? So it says, there will be one perfect city, the New Jerusalem, where all God's children are citizens of our new eternal home. There will be no more injustice, murder, or oppression. There will only be peace, and perfect justice will rule once and for all. And I know we have different definitions of things. I get that. But if injustice and oppression doesn't exist to begin with, then why are we talking about a utopia where it goes away? What a bizarre framework. Because I'm not sure what they consider injustice and oppression unless it directly relates to them. And maybe that's what it is. They only see the world and its threats as happening to them. If those very things happen to anyone else, they are to be disregarded. That is sociopathic.
Yeah. I actually pulled the exact same quote, Amanda, because I thought when reading it, I was like, oh, this is insightful. This is definitely, you have come to religion out of fear. You are a very scared, like I'm going to say little girl, but inner child wise is like showing through when your vision for the future, like you have to disconnect from your current actions and the oppression that others are faced for you to make this reality come true. Like it is so disconnected between what you are doing, how your actions affect people now, and your dream world where none of that exists. Yeah, it doesn't make sense because it comes from a place of fear. And when you operate like that, you come up with silly things like this, because I think everybody, besides the Jerusalem, God's children thing, I think everyone would be like, I would love to live in a world where there's no oppression and everybody is safe and comfortable and can live their full actualized life without all the other shit that we face day to day.
Except it's just a white conservative Christian utopia. No one else.
But if we're hateful now, if we subject others to our will now, in the future, we can live in this beautiful place.
Honest to God, I'm just thinking in this moment, like they tell the left that we're idealistic and we imagine perfect worlds all the time, that our policies aren't viable or realistic. And I'm like, you guys believe in this. What on earth are we talking about?
They just want to get rid of 6 to 7 billion people, and then everything will be fine. And that's a totally normal way to live your life. Like there's nothing crazy about that at all.
Yeah, actually, I mean, Stephen Miller just said that about the United States. He'd like to narrow it down to 100 million? That was his goal.
Yeah.
When people start saying this stuff who are in seats of power, real political power, I mean, this is Christian nationalism. This is what it is. White Christian nationalism is treating your country as though it is a mechanism through which God acts And I know there are Christians, real Christians out there who are terrified of this and who are trying to push back, and I'm grateful to them. But this is truly terrifying. And the fact that they are in positions of power to take action to do things, and they are doing them, is just, I don't know, is there a better word for terrifying? I can't find it yet. I'm having trouble with words. We've discussed that. I'm having trouble finding the right words for this time.
And I want to clarify, when I'm talking about Christian, I'm talking about white evangelical Christians. Like, some of the best people I know are Christian and true believers and genuinely sweet and empathetic and caring. That's not who I'm talking about. And I honestly don't even think it's most Christians that we're talking about right now. So I just want to put that on record.
No, certainly not.
Yeah, I think all of us are speaking the same way. Yeah, this is about extremism, white nationalist Christianity.
Yeah. So the article does take an interesting turn, though. We've been focusing on the Christian nationalist, fundamentalist angle up to this point, but it says of that author, in her defense, she's only really giving a Jesus-inflected re-articulation of a critique of empathy that was made years ago by the Yale professor Paul Bloom, a self-declared atheist, in his book, Against Empathy. I just looked up that book. It came out in 2016. I actually happened to, I don't think I read it, but I heard about it when it came out because I was in a sort of like reading about philosophy phase of life. I was reading a lot about happiness and what people need, how to get that for yourself. How should you construct your life to feel good about it, sort of a thing. And so a book called Against Empathy was kind of like in that genre, right? And so apparently in that book, which I didn't read, this article says, quote, Bloom's argument in that book was that when we empathize with someone, which he defined as feeling what they are feeling, we are likely to make moral errors. If we empathize with the family of a murder victim, we may want revenge instead of justice, for instance. If we empathize with a single child, we may overlook the fate of many other children who need help. Empathy, Bloom argued, can bias us, end quote. And it's so fascinating. The author goes on to point out that just sounds like not enough empathy, right? To have empathy for one child, but not others. Maybe you should just have empathy for more people. He uses the comparison with Joe Biden feeling deeply empathetic for the Israelis who died on October 7th, but then not feeling at all empathetic for the Palestinian victims of Israel's response to that attack. The problem there was not empathy, but a insufficient amount of it. The general idea that empathy biases us by changing our perspective is true, but it's not then a like, well, then the right amount is 0. And that is an absurd conclusion to come to.
What this reminded me of, and sorry for those listening who are not members, but on the member section of this show in our last episode, we talked about Ayn Rand and her perspective about altruism and how her criticism of it was like, it's evil and harmful. That if you are altruistic 100% of the time, which was the strawman argument, then it's evil and harmful. And so therefore we should never, ever be altruistic, which is ridiculous. And in this way, this reminds me of that, this idea that, well, if you have empathy for one group, how can you have empathy for others? Like, that seems like a straw man argument to me. Of course you can have empathy for more people. There's no finite amount of empathy. The reason that Joe Biden was blinded and not able, it seems, to empathize with Palestinians is that he was the target of pro-Israel lobbying for decades. If it was just about empathy, he probably would have had enough to go around. But there are manipulative forces in our world that try to tell you, no, you can only have empathy for this group, not this group. And of course, right now, Christians are saying you can't have empathy for anyone else. You can only have empathy for Christians and white people. And I'm, again, talking about extremist white nationalist Christianity. This is all a straw man argument. There is no finite amount of empathy. There is no finite amount of love. People have the capacity to love and be empathetic for the entire world, which is what the left has been espousing forever, because we apparently have the ability to do that. Everyone has the ability to do that. But if you are being told, no, it's finite, no, having too much is bad, no, then you will fall victim to that.
If we can empathize with Donald Trump and the Peter Thiels of the world, surely we can encourage others to offer empathy.
Yeah, and in that way, I mean, let's say it specifically, I can empathize with their fear of death, that it's difficult, that it's a difficult struggle to come to terms with the reality of our mortality. I can empathize with that. Do I think what they're doing is good? No. But I can have empathy for you and realize that you're a hurt, wounded person who really needs to do some self-reflection and work.
It is strange, like this idea that if you have empathy for someone, you immediately take their side. That's silly. Like, I can understand why Donald Trump is the way he is, and I do feel bad for the way he grew up as a child. It was probably horrific. And that doesn't excuse anything he's doing now, or make me think, yeah, he's got a good point. He had a bad childhood, so it's fine. His father mistreated him, so he gets to do a little fascism, because maybe I should be fascist too because he had a bad childhood. That's not how empathy works. That's not what that means at all.
Let's not fall into black and white thinking, because it's not all or nothing. I think that they think that empathy is, it's like soda, like it might hurt your health and make you gain weight, but some people can just drink soda and it's fine, but it's a risk factor. Empathy is a risk factor against fundamentalist Christianity and conservatism. And it gets to the foundational problem and distinction that I see between the left and right over and over and over again, is that they start with their conclusion and work backward.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way I construct my entire worldview is I start with the premise of desiring to reduce suffering. That's it. Over the years, I've tried to figure out, like, what's at the absolute core of what I'm doing here. I'm having these thoughts. I'm advocating policies and ideas. Like, what's at the core of it? The core is reduce suffering. Now, how do we do that? And that is how I start on a path toward figuring out what works, what doesn't. Does it actually reduce suffering? Does it accidentally cause more? Let's not do that. We learned that lesson. We'll try something else. And that's how you work your way through a series of ideas to come to a set of policies or a sort of ideology. Not exactly. It's like when an ideology is built on trial and error, trying to help people and build up through experimentation, I don't even think it's not a fair word to use. Ideology sort of implies I've already decided what is right. Now the trick is to work backward to get the world to fit the decision I've already made and the conclusion that I've already come to. That is never going to work. They are never going to have a coherent worldview that makes sense because they're doing it backward all the time, fundamentally. And the same is now going for the Silicon Valley people who are in denial about death and a lot of other things. The article brings in Elon Musk. He's against empathy. I think it's probably for multifaceted reasons, but it says Elon Musk keep his empathy at bay because the moment he allows himself to empathize with his trans daughter, he will be confronted with the realization that he's a horrible human being. He had to decide that he didn't like his daughter being trans. Therefore, it broke his brain, and he had to reverse engineer, like, well, if I was empathetic, that would be a risk factor toward having uncomfortable thoughts. And we know how much conservatives hate having uncomfortable thoughts. The only solution then is to toss out empathy whole cloth. Next up, from probably one of our favorite writers who we've never talked about before, so this is exciting. This is from A.R. Moxon at The Reframe. Our purpose isn't efficiency. And I'm just going to read like a big chunk of it to give you a sense of his writing because it's kind of fun. So he says, quote, like American workers, dishwashers have been getting more efficient over the years. Your dishwasher, which is a machine, uses less water and less electricity, which burns less energy at the plant that creates your electricity, and therefore less toxins are pumped into the atmosphere. Meanwhile, maybe your factory, which is a system of machines, stops using inefficient and unsustainable forms of generating energy, like coal or gas, and switches to sustainable modes, like solar or wind. This makes the atmosphere, which is a system that is part of a system called the environment, do what it does, which includes creating a mixture of gases that are just right for humans to breathe, and venting heat in a way that makes summer nice and pleasantly toasty for human bodies rather than an unsurvivable oven, and many other things that make your human body, which itself is a system, more efficient at a very convenient process that we humans call living. Me, I'm a fan of living. Perhaps you're the same. We all have our hobbies. End quote. So we'll get into some of the details, but he goes on a long meandering path talking about the relationship between efficiency as a concept and humans as a species. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Deon, I think you've known this writer longer than any of us. When I came across one, you were like, oh, I love that guy.
It's just, he's number one, like, obviously, I think he's great because maybe I'm not empathetic enough. Maybe he just is hitting exactly the way I think his politics are very similar. So I don't need empathy to agree with him. I just agree with him. But his writing style, it's a funny way to talk about mostly tragic things. Like this article is fundamentally, it's about the tragedy of what capitalism is doing to us. And it's still a fun read. So if you want to read about the worst parts of the world right now, he's a good source because he is a great writer, I think.
I definitely enjoy his writing, but knowing that he's the author is fundamental to understanding the tone and everything for the article, because I did read it thinking, where's this going? And then as soon as I saw his name, I was like, oh, God.
Just a quick note, we have used him before, I think in our show about Pete Hegseth leaking war plans in a Signal thread. And
yeah, that sounds right.
We used one of his articles to talk about that.
Okay, well then I retract my previous statement and everyone should stop being excited.
Continue to be excited.
Should still be excited. We did not acknowledge him at the time. And so I think this is very good to do.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Just as another example, he has decided, I don't know if previously or if he coined it in this article, he refers to the executive branch of our government as the Federal Branch of Sabotage, Destruction, and Punishment, or FBSDP for short. So
satisfying.
Yeah.
Satisfying.
So he goes on to talk about, we're talking about efficiency and the government loves efficiency. I think you wrote this a little while ago about how the Department of Government Efficiency was in the news. And so everyone was talking about how much they love efficiency. And that made us and this author sort of question, what do they mean by efficiency exactly? So he brings in the Energy Star program from the EPA, which has been very effective at making appliances more efficient. And he says, well, you'll never guess what, but our Federal Branch of Sabotage, Destruction, and Punishment is getting ready to shut the Energy Star program down. I can hear you now. What? Shut it down? Even though they love efficiency? I don't believe you. It's true, though. And so if their love of efficiency does not extend to energy savings and cost savings for both consumers at the end of the line and also the people generating the energy and all of that, what might they be interested in making more efficient? And so it goes on, a couple more examples. It says, quote, I can't help but notice that the point of inefficiency helps grow corporate profit, while the point of efficiency does not. So it seems that this different idea of efficiency might have something to do with efficiency of profit over any other efficiency, including the efficiency of preserving and enhancing human lives. So we see where he's going, but then, I did not catch this whenever it was said, referring to the government's apparent vision for the future and including one of my favorite lines from this article. He's talking about Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And he says, quote, how to describe him. Think of a rich asshole, then change nothing about that picture. Got it?
Yeah.
Anyway, Lutnick went out on the television airwaves to describe the federal branch of sabotage, destruction, and punishment's new vision of jobs, where he said this, quote, "It's time to train people not to do the jobs of the past, but to do the great jobs of the future. This is the new model where you work in these kinds of plants for the rest of your life, and your kids work here, and your grandkids work here." End quote.
Boo. Boo.
Right. Can you imagine saying that out loud? And he probably paused there for an applause line. Like, the disconnect is bizarre. So, this writer says what we're all thinking. He says, quote, "And if you're like me, you think to yourself, this is the grand vision, huh? Generation after generation performing manual labor in factories, no advancement for our children, no advancement for our grandchildren, just wave after wave of us."
Howard Lutnick recently, in an interview, talked about how, because he was neighbors to Jeffrey Epstein, he lived like two
That's right.
giant houses down, and he was being interviewed about it. And he's,
yeah, but who wasn't?
all of us, the rest of us. But because he is the exact picture of a rich asshole, and it's this guy, because he's a rich asshole, he has no ability to think about anything outside of himself. So he's talking about this story about how he met him once and his wife thought, oh man, this guy's evil. And I knew immediately that he was evil and I didn't have anything to do with him. And then the interviewer just kept going and let him keep talking and asked, well, what about all these other people that knew him? It's like, oh, they knew. They were all in on it. The reason he made his money is because he's great at blackmail. That's how he made his money.
He had cameras everywhere.
And this is in the middle of this huge internet-wide, nationwide, kind of almost unified American idea that maybe we should release the Epstein files because this guy that is his boss, Donald Trump, is deeply affiliated with him. So he didn't even realize it until the end when he kind of like, oh yeah, wait, hang on. It's not a big deal because he doesn't care really if he says the horrible thing because he's right. That's why he was able to say, basically, he wants long-term, like slavery is probably the right way. I think the author gets into that at some point, that slavery is the most efficient form of this capitalism. That's what they want. He doesn't think of us as fully human. He's thinking about himself, and the best way for him and people like him to make money is just make us all slaves. And well, you'll be okay with it because you're not fully human and you don't really care. This is all related. This is the philosophy of the ruling class. It's all about them. We've gone beyond needing to care about doing social works or programs for other people because the rest of the world's not even really human. I'm the only one that matters. And that is why Howard Lutnick can just say something so ridiculous and not even think it's ridiculous.
But it's the confidence of a mediocre white man that really let him just go with all of that.
Yeah. And this is the capitalist version of utopia that is the parallel to the absurdity that Amanda read from the Fundamentalist Christian. It's like, we're going to have this utopia where everyone believes what I believe and they all like it and we all live happily ever after. And Lutnick comes along and describes the prison scenes from Andor season 1. And he's like, but the difference is you're going to like it. That's it. That's the whole difference. Like, you're going to be in prison working in factories, but you're going to like it somehow. I'm just going to skip past that part and it'll be great for everyone.
I think that he made these comments in connection to the conversation about bringing manufacturing jobs back. And we also did an episode about that people should check out from months ago. But as with the quotes we pulled from that conversation, the idea is, no, see, it'll be fine because you have job security, or we're going to make them good paying jobs or something. And like, those are the things that they say. I don't believe any of them will be true, but those are things they say to make the drudgery work sound like it's going to be better than what you're doing now. Not acknowledging that there are a lot of other ways we could make the world better right now without forcing people to multi-generational drudgery in a factory. There's like a lot of other options in between where we are now and that. And that's crazy and absurd to even say sounds good. Like, I'd love to hear, did anyone actually think that sounds good? I'd love to hear those people talk about it. I can't imagine anyone, right, left, anywhere in between, thinking that sounds great.
I'm going to call it out. I think you all are a little disconnected. The other day, when I was talking to some children in our program, like I was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they all said manufacturer workers. I mean,
Right.
no, of course it's obscene. Like, I don't even know a family that's like selling their children on the dream of doing a job that is mediocre.
Right.
I don't even hear that. So I think it's disconnect for parents who want their children to have a better life than them, and a disconnect between children who might actually have someone in their family that works in a factory, sees the physical and mental toll because it's not valued work. You're never paid what you actually deserve for doing that work. So watching that, yeah, I can't imagine a child being like, oof, I want to live that life on repeat, and I want that for my child as well.
This is what we see with the coal industry, multi-generational industry where people get sick, they die horrible deaths, they're in extremely dangerous situations, and many times are barely scraping by. But the next generation sees that and says, yeah, I don't want that often. Like for a long time, it was kind of a badge of honor, but eventually that started to change. And of course, it changed even more as these coal mining owners made life more dangerous and cut wages further. Nothing got better or even stayed the same.
And you only accept that as your life out of desperation, out of like, there isn't anything better.
Yeah.
This is what there is. And that's what he's selling. That is actually the vision he is selling. There's nothing better out there. The most you can hope for is security. You will have a job.
There's an aspect of authoritarianism that I didn't fully understand until recently, is that I always thought that part of the, I guess kink is probably the best way to say it, is that the kink of the authoritarian was that they knew people were suffering and they liked it. But I think there's levels of the sociopathy in between where there's the people that want to do the authoritarianism, but also expect you to enjoy being ruled and controlled.
Totally.
Maybe that's more sociopathic, because maybe Howard Lutnick is crazier than Donald Trump. Because I think Donald Trump does enjoy like people suffering and it's a zero-sum game and he wins and you lose and that's it. Whereas some of these people, they want us to enjoy subjugation and don't understand why we wouldn't enjoy it, because they're our betters and they're doing what's best for us. And that is really eye-opening / terrifying.
That is so human, because at the end of the day, no matter what kind of psychological state you live in, it doesn't take the need for like social connection out of it. So I do think wanting to be liked, wanting to be well received, even, those are uniquely human, versus then everything that comes after that is more associated with your status in life. It makes sense to me that a wealthy person would care what other people think, but also they are so wealthy and disconnected from society that they would be under the false belief that I can do what I want. I can subjugate people and they will enjoy it. They will like this vision because then they don't have to worry. Like, he doesn't know what we actually worry about. He thinks the worry is like having a job, not like feeling fulfilled or connected in community. Like, there's not those connections.
Right. They think our lives don't have value. So how could they possibly be worth living?
Yeah. And it all reminds me of maybe the insight I've been repeating for the most number of years, which is that no one thinks of themselves as the bad guy. So fascists are just one of the most extreme versions of people who have a fortress of reinforcing ideology that puts them in a state of mind that allows them to think that they're the good guy, or at least neutral. I mean, like, Donald Trump knows he's not going to heaven, so he knows he's bad. But I mean, the next element of it is like, he definitely thinks he's at least neutral. And, Deon, you just pointed out that Donald Trump probably sees the whole world as a zero-sum game, and he wins and you lose. And so his version of neutrality is like, well, I didn't like make the game. I'm just the best playing it, right? So he can justify subjugating people because he's just like, but that's just how it works. In order for me to win, you have to lose. That's not my fault. So that's like the closest you get to people realizing that they're not that good, but they'll still justify it anyway. Everyone else is probably closer to Lutnick, and they're like, no, whatever my vision is, you'll like it. Actually, that reminds me of our favorite joke from the communists who started realizing that having an authoritarian style of communism wasn't the right way to go. So they had an internal self-effacing joke about communism, about a guy who's up on a soapbox shouting to the crowd, "Come the revolution, you'll all have peaches and cream." And a guy from the crowd shouts, "I don't like peaches and cream." And the guy on the soapbox says, "Come the revolution, you'll like peaches and cream." It's a pretty good joke.
Yeah.
So to wrap up this article, A.R. Moxon writes a nice little summation. I love a good summation. It's time to unkidnap our minds. It's time to become something other than efficient, which is a wonderful thing for a machine or a system to be, and can be a wonderful tool for a human to harness, but is a terrible and enslaving purpose for a life. It's time to realize that efficiency is a property for humans to use. Humans are not for it to use. It's time to realize that human society is not a corporation, and we are not its employees, and that its profits are ours. The question that rises for me is, if our purpose isn't efficiency, then what is it? End quote. And luckily, I think we have answers in our next article. So get excited for that.
I love the example of the post office that was referenced in this article. I know we didn't quote it specifically, and I know we've had this discussion as a group before, but talking about purposes. And there's a mind frame that everything has to turn a profit, and that is how it's efficient. When he makes the argument that the point of the post office, the profit or the win of the post office, is the post office.
Yeah.
Of having a system that you can deliver mail. And like the framing that he uses to me is just such a good argument that I could present that to so many people across my life and them get it. Because I do think that sometimes people have feelings that they haven't got the right information to be able to articulate it or to see the ways that it shows up in our life. It just remains a feeling, like something feels icky. Something feels not right, not human based. And that argument for the post office, which shocker, that has been under fire, and there are powers that be that want to privatize it. Of course, like there are things that are worth having that serve a purpose to people that don't have to be profitable. That framing is so helpful. I love how he wrote this article. Low-key kind of think that he was writing it for me, because he put several notes in there that I was like, oh my gosh, like hitting on my heartstrings here, guy.
Swoon.
But yeah, that was one of them. The post office reference was definitely a home run.
I have that quote here. I think it's worth reading. "Listen to me. Our profit from the post office is the post office. Our profit from a library is the library. Our profit from a school is the school. And our profit from our lives is life. Our life. Ours." I know. I wanted to clap after that.
Yeah.
I just got chills with you rereading it. So, I mean, it seems so simple, right? Yeah. But the fact that we have to make the case.
Yeah. This episode is sponsored by A.R. Moxon. He is paying us to say all these things.
That is not true.
No. So, the purpose of us saying that this article is great is because you should read this article, and you should go read him because he's enjoyable to read. If you want to give him a little cash every now and then to pay for his writing, that would be great. But the purpose of this is that he has good information, that exactly like Erin said. That is such a good way to tell people what we're trying to say in a way that is better than probably most of us could put it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not us personally, but most other people on the internet.
Right, yeah, obviously. Sure. Obviously, we're better at it than everybody else.
So he ends that article pondering what life is really for, if not efficiency, which brings us to this article that definitely gave some needed insight into the conversation recently between Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is from Liz Bukhar, just writing in her Substack with the headline, Ezra Klein just showed us everything wrong with secularized meditation. We had a conversation from members a couple of weeks ago about this discussion. It gave lots of people lots of thoughts and feelings in a variety of directions. This article zeroes in on one thing specifically and gives us the insight we need. So it says, quote, there's a moment in Ezra Klein's recent interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates that's been bugging me. It's a small moment, easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but it reveals something crucial about how secularized meditation practices can become tools for avoiding rather than engaging with political reality. Here's what Coates said, quote, Martin Luther King could be standing up telling his own people, we do not embrace violence at all. It is morally repugnant. We embrace love, and that could get you shot. Not burn it down, but love can get you shot. You just have a different view of the country, end quote. And then the article goes on saying, here's how Klein responded to that comment. Quote, there's a Buddhist meditation I like. This is a weird place to go, but it goes like this. I'm of the nature to grow sick. I'm of the nature to grow old. I'm of the nature to lose the people I love. I'm of the nature to die. How then shall I live? The article continues, do you feel that whiplash? From the specificity of political murder, from lynching and assassination, from love can get you shot, to a generalized meditation about personal aging and death, end quote.
Not to get infuriated again about that whole thing, but like, I did catch that when I watched it live, and that was one of many points where Ta-Nehisi Coates was talking about very specific things, and Ezra didn't hear him, and in this specific instance, didn't hear him because he has this very individualized, Americanized vision of Buddhism, which is, I think, toxic is the right way to describe it, because the way he used that was such a cop-out. It's such a way to not engage with what was just said. Mm-hmm. And he does that over and over again, but in this specific case, he uses Buddhism to not engage with the real world, and this article will go on and explain why that doesn't make sense. But that was that little interaction summarized the whole interview / conversation / talking past each other situation, that Ezra has this little individualized vision of the world, and he's trying to make it fit, and it doesn't.
Yeah, so this article goes on and explains Buddhism, basically, and says, within Buddhism, mindfulness meditation is one of several integrated practices. For example, there's a conceptual trilogy that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that the writer refers to as a three-legged stool where all legs are necessary for stability. The first leg means generosity and action directed towards others, social engagement, service, addressing collective suffering. The second leg means ethics, following precepts, moral guidelines for how to live in community. And the third means mental development, meditation, and mindfulness practice. And so, contrary to that, there's the Americanization of it. And the writer says, quote, popular mainstream mindfulness practice focuses almost exclusively on bhavana. That was the third leg of the stool. It strips away the social obligation and ethical framework, leaving only the technique for training your individual mind. And that's the core of it. And why Ezra Klein, hearing a very specific and pointed comment about real-world political violence, immediately turns inward to how he personally, in his desire to calm his psychological state in the face of disruption, refers to a meditative practice designed to help you calm your mental state. But his meditative practice has obviously been stripped of its context, and he's missing the other two legs of that stool. So his reaction to political violence is, yeah, but how can we be calm about that? How can I feel not so bad about death personally when talking about Martin Luther King Jr. being assassinated? The disconnect is ridiculous, and he knows it. He says the words, "This is a weird place to go," but he goes there anyway because he doesn't know how to do anything else. Apparently, when we had a much longer conversation about this, we talked about how, like, he's at the New York Times, he's a little too disconnected from people with real problems. And it turns out he's been meditating for like 15 years and is doing it in this Americanized way where his focus has always been on calming and centering himself amid strife. And so no wonder he's totally ill equipped to deal with real world problems that require those other two legs of the stool. Dealing with social problems collectively, how to understand an ethical framework that works as part of social obligations. Like, all of that is missing in that conversation he had with Ta-Nehisi Coates and in a lot of what he says and writes.
So look, I'm no expert in Buddhism, but I've dabbled. And I think that he could have answered his own, I guess he wasn't asking himself a question here, but in the meditation that he read, then how shall I live is, of course, what we've been talking about in differing ways throughout this whole episode, right? Then how shall I live? Ta-Nehisi Coates is giving an example of somebody who lived a certain way, who lived with love and compassion and kindness, and also took action to try to make things better for people. And so that question, as part of the meditation, is important. Ezra Klein just missed the importance of that question. He maybe thought this is an unanswerable question or a difficult question, instead of looking to those who we have in history and in present day who show us how we should live, how we should make sure that the human race is doing better and improving our quality of life and connectedness. I almost can't blame him because I know how widespread this is. The issue with meditation being removed from its original teachings has been talked about for over a decade, because whenever the mindfulness movement took off, which was at least in the last 15 years or so, I think, people started talking about that like fairly quickly. Like within the first 2 years, they were like, well, wait a minute. If we're only doing the meditation part and people don't have the proper context, then aren't we losing something, right? And that conversation, I don't know how widespread it was, but I did catch wind of it. And so he's certainly not alone. There are tons of people who are dedicated to a practice of meditation who are completely disconnected from where it all came from. It's sad to see somebody in the position that Klein is in and having a conversation with someone who is so deeply, like, Ta-Nehisi Coates is a deep thinker. He is really working through the problems of our day and diagnosing and analyzing and giving us language to talk about what is happening. And Ezra Klein just exposed how he's not on that level. And in a way that exposed that even the stuff that he is dedicated to and very quote unquote knowledgeable in, he doesn't have the whole picture. And how many people in our society are like that? Tons of people in our society are like that, because America likes to take things, twist them and pull them through a knothole, and they come out the other end as a product, which is what meditation has been for the last 15 years. So we're in a position where this is not just about Ezra Klein. His response is indicative of a wider culture of Americans, and especially people like Klein, who have a lot of influence in their position, just regurgitating, not even incorrect, just like twisted, warped versions of things that could actually, in their whole and in their entire context, be incredibly valuable to the human race. Because, for instance, Buddhism itself has been beneficial for millions of people through thousands of years. So there are things to learn here. This is a professor of religion who's writing this article, Liz Bukhar. And there is plenty for us to learn from and to find a way to move forward with some knowledge from our ancestors. But Klein isn't doing that. And again, it's not just him. It's a widespread issue.
I think this is one of the major issues with colonization, because I think that's what's happened here. It has gone through the colonizing ringer. Buddhism, through the Americanized version, automatically becomes a tool for efficiency, a tool to make you a better worker, because now you can deal with stress at work, not a tool to make the world better, because, well, colonization, America's the best. How could you make it better than this? So why would it need those two prongs? And I think it's interesting that Ezra is having this conversation with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who, because he is a deep thinker and because he does want to go through and figure out how to solve problems, he burned a lot of bridges, because he went to Israel and he went to Gaza and the West Bank and saw for himself what was really going on, because he didn't have a full understanding. And not saying that you have to go there to fully understand, but he did. And he now thinks very clearly that what's going on there, it's an apartheid state. It is unacceptable. And he's willing to say that here and give up on some financial benefits of having a politically not acceptable position in a lot of circles. It is, for him, more important to say what he believes to be true, to do something to help change, to help affect something, as opposed to coming up with slogans. And what Ezra Klein has done in the same time that Ta-Nehisi Coates was going over there and seeing what he saw and coming back and trying to report on that, Ezra Klein was repackaging neoliberalism as abundance and selling the same old slop in a new package to be the solution to America's problems. And America's problems are much deeper than that. They require a much deeper analysis and more sacrifice, because what abundance fundamentally is a no sacrifice, everything will be great, because everything will always be great if we just keep doing more and more of what we were already doing, as opposed to seeing just how deep the problems of colonization, of white supremacy, of patriarchy are in this country, and addressing them instead of finding ways to just accept them and move on.
I like the comparison between abundance and making the connection towards this meditation perspective that he has, because I do think, of course, leaning towards abundance then means you don't have to challenge your own societal position. Like, you still get to benefit from that system. And I think his reaction to the Martin Luther King assassination is very indicative of that. Like, well, remove myself from the words that you're saying, remove myself from the situation. How do I calm and find inner peace? Not how do I look at the ways that this has still impacted society? Let's be honest, in a world where there's more equity, if you will, Ta-Nehisi Coates versus Ezra Klein. Ezra isn't, I'm not going to say he's untalented. I don't mean it in that way.
They're not on the same level.
No, they're definitely not on the same level. And he would never have the status that he does in that equitable world where everybody is given, the same opportunities or have the same access to it. So I think going back to that, how do I center? How do I disconnect? How am I okay with this? Abundance is absolutely the answer. Keep the neoliberal ways rolling. Pretend to have conversations where I'm not actually listening to the other person or responding to them in any natural way. The whole interview, I know we've talked about it, but it was cringe. It was super cringy, just because it didn't actually seem like they were having a conversation or engaging back and forth. It was definitely Ta-Nehisi Coates bringing things back to him based on the questions that he was asking, and him pivoting, him coming up with that I-focused retorts, if you will.
Yeah.
And meditation, maybe he needs a better mantra. Instead of saying I'm of the nature that I'm going to lose the people I love, maybe you need to be take a little note from Kamala Harris and be I am of the nature that I exist in the context of everyone before me and after me. Like maybe then you can find your place in the world, that you are to amplify other people like Ta-Nehisi Coates who are doing this deep thinking instead of just subjecting us to listening to your personal mantra and how meditation is the answer for you to be okay with the way the world is.
The other thing is, it exposes Klein's fear of death. That's how he responded. And since that's what we're talking about today, I think that's worth bringing up. You know, like Coates talks about Martin Luther King being murdered for his beliefs, and Klein's response is, I have this meditation that I've been probably using in my practice that talks about acceptance of death. And that's why they were talking past each other, because Ta-Nehisi Coates saying something so poignant as love can get you shot made Ezra Klein think, I'm struggling with my mortality. And that was his response.
Thank you.
So
actually,
it was just like two ships in the night, you know? I mean, it was very strange.
No, thank you, Amanda, because I think that's what I was circling, and you articulated that so well. That's exactly it.
Throughout this conversation, I've just been imagining what the Calm app or the Headspace app would be like if they incorporated community mindedness and social justice in their meditation practices. If it wasn't purely commodified for American consumption. So this article goes on and points out this is like very important irony that they say, quote, the irony is that Buddhism isn't always divorced from political action. Vietnamese Buddhist monks self-immolated to protest the war. Tibetan monks and nuns have resisted Chinese occupation. But when mindfulness was commodified for American consumption, it was depoliticized. Meditation became mindfulness, and mindfulness is about managing your individual stress, not addressing systemic oppression, about optimizing your performance, not transforming unjust conditions, about finding your own inner peace, not working for collective liberation, end quote, which again is the most classic individual versus the social good dichotomy. What is good for you personally, and particularly often in the short term, can be absolutely at odds with what is the social good, the greater good for all, which would come back on you and benefit you in the long run. But we are left with that choice. Do we do the thing that is good for me personally in the short term, or do we work for something bigger that we don't get to just soothe ourselves and disregard the injustice? We actually face it. And so that's stressful. We're going to take time out of our lives and face horrible realities that are creating injustice and work towards fixing them. Well, that's like annoying. That's an inconvenience for me. It would be nicer to just meditate and calm myself. But that is that dichotomy, and it comes up over and over again. But all of this leads, I'm just going to very quickly mention, there's another article. It's ironically, but not ironically because of America, from CNBC. This is a business-focused article that I just happened to come across. The headline is, I've studied stress for 20 years. Here's the most underrated way to cure it. We've been completely wrong this whole time. And the writer goes on to point out that corporations, because that's the context of this discussion, corporations have been trying to figure out how to get people to be less stressed so they can be better employees for the sake of efficiency, as we're all major fans of here. So they say about all of these various stress practices for employees that the vast majority of them don't work, but one of them does. And it says, quote, when researchers analyzed more than 90 workplace wellness programs, nearly all failed to improve employee well-being. The one notable exception, programs that encouraged employees to do charity or volunteer work. These actually worked, end quote. And so to summarize our entire conversation today, people, obviously, particularly those in power and most at risk of driving all the rest of us into oblivion with their obsession about never dying, we all need to come to terms with the reality of life and its end. Not doing that is driving people crazy. Number two, understanding the importance of empathy for the sake of building systems that actually work for people. You can decide what systems are going to work for people first and then work backwards and try to convince everyone you're right, but that's not going to work. So start with empathy, build the systems based on people's actual needs. Third, reject the entire system of our economics that demands that we be efficient for the sake of economics and ultimately for the sake of the already wealthy. That's an easy one. That's ridiculous. No one should be in favor of that or voluntarily sign up for it. And then finally, don't lose the connection with the need to engage in community. And as we just learned about meditation, it is the nature of Americanism to disconnect from community connections and historical context that would lead to that, because we love individualism. We love just taking care of ourselves. But it turns out engaging in your community and doing work for others is literally what your body and society needs to be healthy. So it is not even optimizing your individual selfishness to be selfish. You would be better off personally by focusing on other people. Turns out. Did we solve it?
I mean, I think we solved it. I think we also helped Ezra Klein, if he listens to this, helped him work through some stuff.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy with that. So if we can just do that. Oh, and then also, just remember that the future of fascism is hanging in the balance as to whether or not we can convince people to not be afraid of death. So just put that on your to-do list. If you have any thoughts you want to add, you can send us a message at 202-999-3991. Send an email to j@bestoftheleft.com or reach us on Signal at bestoftheleft.01. Thanks for listening, and remember that this is all really happening, so continue to be decent, act like what you do and say matters, and do what matters most.